hey, is it one of those dev videos where we start off with some viral nonsense, but by the end of the video attempt to drill down deep at some underlying ethic? Yeah, it's one of those. Let's roll the clip.
Okay, so this raggedy ass bitch just came into Erotic and stole from my store. Okay, stop, don't touch me. And we're gonna follow her to her house because she says she's gonna pay for it there. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So enjoy the ride and we'll let you know where she lives. Let's play a game called Look in the Thief's Purse. So let's see what she has.
Stop.
Oh, she also took a skirt, Justin. Did you see that?
What? No.
You raggedy bitch. You look at me like I'm crazy and you stole from me. The irony, right?
Don't steal from small businesses, Okie.
In case you don't get what's going on, this viral TikTok was shot by the owner of a local shop. That's the woman in red. The other lady, she's a thief. The store owner caught her shoplifting and decided to abandon her store to follow the thief onto the bus, where she made this video. And by the end, yeah, the thief was arrested. On the one hand, there's a big old justice boner here. The thief thinks she can shoplift, she gets caught, justice is served. On the other, some people are saying that going so far as to leave your own storefront and follow her back to her house is pretty wild. Did you even lock up shop, lady? Or is the door wide open with nobody holding down the fort back there? Also, it's just really funny that she runs a sex shop, and the item being stolen was some type of sexy clothing. Trashy people all around. But the important part is what some of the replies are saying. Like, check this shit out. Small business owners are not a necessary part of society. They have far too much self-importance. If you can't afford to have shoplifters at your business, you can't afford to have a business. Maybe spend less on fancy coffee. My whole thing is, don't you have insurance? Shrink should be built into your budget. This is just kind of strange. Shoplifting is moral and good. Why are people applauding this? Stealing from a shop isn't the same as stealing from a person. The moral of the story is to carry mace to protect yourself from small business owners, who are almost universally insane people. Can we finally admit that small business owners are all incredibly annoying? Ransack every small business you get the opportunity to, even if you don't need anything. There's a growing segment of the population that seems to think that stealing from a business, even a small one where it's not a large exploitative corporation like Amazon or Walmart, but a local member of the community just trying to get by, is completely fine, because it is the action of running a business itself that is immoral, not the size of the business. This is obviously nonsense, and is just ideological cover for theft. But every time a video of people robbing from small shops goes viral, you see these kind of justifications in the comments. Especially if there's a racial component to the theft. Like if it's a non-black owned business in a majority black neighborhood, people will spout off about reparations. If it's a black owned business in that same neighborhood, they'll spout off about perpetuating whiteness because running your own business is acting white. It's all bullshit to post hoc justify what is clearly just rampant theft. If we dig a bit deeper, there's another level to this too. Check out these replies. Small business owners? You mean pretend CEOs and cops? Every small business is a little bit of capital away from doing company towns and public lashings. Petite bourgeois behavior. These small business owners are the foundational support for fascism, just so you know. This kind of girl is the social basis for fascism, by the way. Call CERN, one of the Hitler particles escaped. Small business owners all have many particles of Hitler within them. Small business owners all love Adolf Hitler. I have a coworker that always lectures me about shopping at local businesses, and I have to remind them that small business owners are just small capitalists. The petit bourgeois have the potential to be a reactionary class and will, more often than not, side with the bourgeois. There is a completely retarded level of discourse right now, which is equating small businesses with fascism. And the source of it comes from that Hitler particle joke that several of the replies alluded to. In fact, one just right out says it, Trotsky Hitler particles quote. What he's referring to is a 1933 essay by Leon Trotsky called What is National Socialism? Trotsky was a Russian-Ukrainian Marxist revolutionary and was an early friend of Lenin. Despite ongoing disagreements with Lenin over Marxist ideology, he would ultimately become a central component within Lenin's regime. The 1917 revolution had Lenin and Trotsky as its co-leaders. After Lenin's death, Stalin recognized Trotsky as the only other individual who was capable of directly challenging his legitimacy as a fellow heir to Lenin's movement. And so Trotsky was eventually pushed out of all of his government positions and exiled. Eventually, the Soviets assassinated him in Mexico. His own political theory, Trotskyism, a branch of Marxism separate from Leninism, only came back into focus after the fall of the Soviet Union. as after Stalin's death, Trotsky was the only major unpersoned Soviet theorist who wasn't politically rehabilitated. Trotsky was heavily critical of Stalinism, where, to describe the Soviet Union under Stalin, he coined the term degenerated workers' state, which described a socialist revolution that got stuck in the dictatorship of the proletariat phase, where the working class's control over the state didn't move towards withering away, as Marx predicted, but instead entrenched itself as a lumbering bureaucracy. In this way, Trotsky was a purer Marxian socialist than Stalin. Stalin's focus was on bringing to bear the full might of the capitalist mode of production within Russia, which Marx said was one of the preconditions for a true socialist revolution, while Trotsky believed that these efforts simply amounted to collaboration with capitalists, and there would be no true socialism unless the entire world's working class revolted as one. However, in practice, Trotskyism was no different than Stalinism, as Trotsky himself, in capacity as leader of the Red Army, played his part in many repressive purges. I figured I'd quickly go over all of that because I just realized I've never really talked about Trotsky in this channel before. I will say though, one big difference between Stalin and Trotsky is that Stalin, up until Germany invaded the Soviet Union, was completely fine with Hitler's National Socialism, but Trotsky was highly critical of it, for many of the same reasons he was critical of Stalinism, which brings us back to that 1933 essay. The quote from the essay that everyone's referencing, by the way, is, "Not every exasperated petty bourgeois could become Hitler, but a particle of Hitler is lodged in every exasperated petty bourgeois." Just so we're clear, Marxists view everything in terms of two social classes: the proletariat, who have no capital and must work the means of production owned by their people to survive, and the bourgeois, who own the means of production and pay workers to work them but don't have to work themselves. Out of these two groups, Marx described two more subgroups: the lumpenproles, members of the proletariat with no revolutionary potential because they were too unthinking to revolt, in his estimation, and the petty bourgeois, who own the means of production like the bourgeois does, but also work the means of production like the proletariat does. The business owner who is so rich he doesn't need to work, he just hires people to do all the work and scrapes surplus value off the top, that's a member of the bourgeois. The shop owner, who may or may not hire workers to work his shop, but also works in his shop himself, contributing his own labor to it alongside owning it, that is a member of the petty bourgeois. This essay is Trotsky's attempt to link Hitler's National Socialism with the concept of the petty bourgeois, the business owner who owns his own business and works in it. Trotsky blames them for the fall of democracy. The decay of the middle strata did not mean that they were made into proletarians, inasmuch as the proletariat itself was casting out a gigantic army of chronically unemployed. The pauperization of the petty bourgeois, barely covered by ties and socks of artificial silk, eroded all official creeds and first of all the doctrine of democratic parliamentarianism. Trotsky asserts that when the chips are down, the petty bourgeois, despite being nearly as poor as the workers, will ultimately side with the bourgeois against a workers' revolution. The National Renaissance leaned wholly upon the middle class, the most backward part of the nation, the heavy ballast of history. Political art consisted in fusing the petty bourgeois into oneness through its common hostility to the proletariat. Impotent before big capital, the petty bourgeois hopes in the future to regain its social dignity through the ruin of workers. Trotsky believed that the petty bourgeois possessed a heroic spirit, a term that he uses derisively to describe anti-materialist thinking, and Hitler used that spirit to stoke the fires of German mysticism. To evolution, materialist thought and rationalism of the 20th, 19th, and 18th centuries is counterposed in his mind national idealism as the source of heroic inspiration. Hitler's nation is the mythological shadow of the petty bourgeois itself, a pathetic delirium of a thousand-year Reich. Trotsky's point across all of these quotes is that the reason the petty bourgeois rejects the workers' revolution, despite standing to benefit from it, is because unlike the worker who has nothing to lose but his chains, the petty bourgeois has their small shops and small businesses to lose. In their desire for an orderly, safe state that allows their business to continue, the petty bourgeois is the backbone of a fascist takeover of government. Now, this isn't my opinion, it's Trotsky's. You know how I feel about all this.
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
And while a lot of modern online socialists reject Stalin, they're still cool with Trotsky. This is why, for example, the left-wing rag Jacobin had no problem publishing in 2018 that small businesses were overrated because unlike large corpos, they didn't have deep enough pockets to offer huge benefit packages, and the jobs at those businesses were often more insecure. And fair enough. If your boss is the owner of the company, and he treats you unfairly, and the HR department is just the boss's wife, you're pretty much shit out of luck. The proximity between the boss and the worker does mean there's a chance for a bad boss to be more directly exploitative. But it works the other way around too. If you know your boss personally, if you're friends, If you care about each other, he's much more likely to cut you some slack or help you out during the rough times. But forget about political theory, here's some actual hard numbers. In the United States, at least in 2014, the data showed that in terms of the total number of businesses, corpos were actually quite low. C corporations in this instance are the Walmarts and Amazons, big business. Coming in second place are S corporations and partnerships. S corporations are small businesses that have less than 100 employees, while partnerships are businesses where all the people involved are partners in the business. This can either be like a worker co-op model, like the market socialists prefer, or something like a law firm's co-ownership between all the lawyers who make it to that level. And coming in first place, by far, are sole proprietors. These are people who are simply in business for themselves. They, and sometimes their direct family, run the business with no outside help. They own and work the means of production entirely on their own. What's notable about all of this is that socialists always say shit like, workers should own the means of production. And yet, for example, when the trucker protest in Canada happened, yes, it's still coming, the socialists rejected the truckers revolting against the state because they were owners of capital. There's a contradiction here, at least on the surface of it. They want workers to own the means of production, but when a worker actually manages to do just that, they've become a member of the petty bourgeois, an upholder of capitalism, a seed of fascism, poor like the proletariat, but ultimately reactionary against the proletarian revolution. Despite the socialist claim that they are pro-worker, they don't actually want any individual worker to own the means of production. They don't want a society where every single individual is a sole proprietor, where everyone runs their own independent business and trades amongst each other and there are no large corporations. They want the workers as a class to collectively own all of the means of production. This desire stems back to what we've covered a dozen times in the channel before, Marx's On the Jewish Question, where he criticizes liberalism for granting individuals the right to remain separate, and he asserts that humans have a lasting, permanent connection through simple contact. Here's what I mean by that. In the liberal view, if you buy food from the store, after the transaction is complete, the store has no right to tell you what to do with your food, and you have no right to tell the store what to do with your money. In essence, the two parties have become strangers again. It's an individualistic way of viewing the economy. But in the Marxian view, as Marx asserts in that essay, you now have a stake in the store's operations as a customer, and the store now has a stake in your operations. Economic transactions leave lingering connections, and as such, we are all permanently connected. There is no such thing as a private sphere isolated from the outside world in this view. This gives us the basis for Gramsci's Everything is Political and Mussolini's Nothing Outside the State, which we've also gone over many times before on this channel. Therefore, if you're a small business owner, socialists will always hate you. Not because you're a kernel of fascism that a reactionary movement can coalesce around if left unchecked. That's just retarded. It's because you're attempting to operate at least somewhat independently, at least partially outside of a system of centralized control. It is for this same reason that socialists also hate homesteaders, or people who voluntarily leave society to go live in the woods. Assume for a minute that socialists controlled the levers of government and also nationalized large corporations like Walmart and Amazon. In this world, do you think you'd even be allowed to run your own operation? Of course not. If the workers, as a class of people, collectively owned the means of production as a class of object, if you as an individual owned one individual means of production privately in an exclusive manner, you would be stealing from the people. The socialists' stated hatred of power structures seems paradoxical when compared to their stated hatred of people building a life beyond those structures, but only because they envision themselves as being the inevitable inheritors of that power. And if you're rejecting their overarching superstructure, if you're rejecting the connection that we all have in the Marxian view, in order to build something for yourself that is private, local, and particular, then you're a reactionary who is rejecting socialism itself. This is why nobody on the left really cared when during the Summer of Love 2020, BLM rioters burned down small businesses. They would say things like, "Shut up, insurance will cover it. Our political movement is more important," even though in a lot of these cases, insurance didn't actually cover it. Because, as per their ideology, the liquidation of the petty bourgeois is actually one of their goals. Except, of course, if it's a black-owned business. Then they're proper revolutionaries who are down for the cause or whatever. Fuck me, dude. At the end of the day, though, there is no contradiction here. The socialist wants the petty bourgeois plugged back into the system of capitalist social control, because they believe after the revolution, they will be the ones in control of that system. Trotsky said that today's small business owner, in deriving his livelihood from outside the control of that system, is tomorrow's counter-revolutionary. He is incentivized to fight socialism to maintain his own individuality. And in prioritizing his freedom from wage slavery, he also prioritizes his freedom from the socialist project. This was the one thing that Trotsky was right about. And you know what? This is actually good. It is good for people to want to be independent and free and individualistic, no matter how booty blasted the communists get. So when you see the next viral video about how small businesses are fascist and how it's good to steal from them, keep in mind everything that we've discussed today. Where you and I might see a simple, honest shopkeeper, they see a rebellion against their future totalitarian system.
I mean, I've never heard the word collective Without
I know, but
Leon
Daniel puts
Trotsky.